Some things we give away thinking we'll never miss them, until one quiet evening, when the house feels too still, and we realize we can't buy them back. You know that moment, when you open a drawer or a forgotten box and find the faint scent of a loved one's perfume, a faded photograph, or the handwriting of someone you thought you'd never forget. Suddenly, decluttering doesn't feel freeing anymore. It feels like losing pieces of yourself. Maybe you followed the latest organizing trend or were told, if it doesn't spark joy, let it go. But for many of us over 60, joy doesn't live in trends, it lives in memories. Every card, every record, every chipped mug carries a heartbeat, a story, a reminder that we've lived deeply. What's one thing you wish you'd held on to just a little longer? Share it below. Your story might help someone pause before letting go. And before we go on, if this is stirring something in you, don't just hit that new hype button. It's YouTube's way of letting seniors' voices rise to the top, proving that memories, not minimalism, are what make a home truly full. Meet Eleanora Brant, 72, a retired piano teacher from Vermont with a quiet grace that fills every corner of her home. Her days once began with soft bark melodies drifting through the kitchen and ended with tea by the window, watching cardinals land on her garden fence. Her home was modest but full of life, shelves of old sheet music, a dozen teacups collected from travels with her late husband, and walls that echoed with the laughter of former students. But when lockdown hit, and the world seemed to slow to a whisper, Eleanora found herself scrolling through decluttering videos that promised freedom through simplicity. Less is more, they said. Start fresh. It felt inspiring at first, like reclaiming control in a chaotic world. So she started. Drawer by drawer, closet by closet. She gave away clothes, photos, souvenirs, even her old metronome, the one her husband had repaired for her on their 5th anniversary. The house looked cleaner, lighter, almost magazine perfect. But after a few weeks, the silence started to feel heavier. Something invisible had shifted. One chilly morning, Eleanora opened a storage box and found an empty picture frame. No photo, just the faint outline of where one used to be. That was the moment it hit her. In her pursuit of simplicity, she hadn't just decluttered her space, she had decluttered her story. The walls still stood, the rooms were still tidy, but the warmth, the echo of the life she'd built, had thinned. She sat on the floor surrounded by half-filled donation bags and whispered, "Where did I go?" That day, she stopped organizing and started remembering. Instead of asking, "What should I get rid of?" she began asking, "What still holds meaning?" She started writing a new list, not of items to discard, but of moments she wished she'd protected. It wasn't about guilt, it was about gratitude. And that list began with one small mistake, one she never saw coming. 1. Handwritten letters and cards. Eleanora once had 3 large boxes tucked neatly beneath the cedar chest at the foot of her bed, boxes that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. Inside were decades of letters and cards, birthday wishes written in shaky cursive, anniversary notes sprinkled with pressed rose petals, and a few scribbled reminders from her late husband Harold, things like "Don't forget the concert at 7" or "Love you, even when you steal the blankets." Each one was a fragment of a shared life, sealed in ink. When the decluttering craze swept through her neighborhood during lockdown, Eleanora decided it was time to simplify. Less is more, she'd whisper, folding another sweater, emptying another drawer. The boxes of letters were her final challenge. She told herself she was being sensible, that love wasn't in paper, but in memory. After all, she'd scanned a few of them into her tablet. Wasn't that enough? She didn't cry as she carried the boxes to the recycling bin. She even smiled a little, imagining how light her home would feel. But that evening, when the rain began to tap against the window and she reached for her tea, something in the quiet felt heavier than before. The house was clean, but it was missing its heartbeat. Weeks later, while sorting photos on her tablet, Eleanora opened one of the scanned letters. It was from Harold, dated their first Christmas together. The handwriting was bold, familiar, alive. But on the screen, it looked hollow. She tried to trace it with her finger, to feel the weight of his pen, but glass doesn't hold pressure. There were no faint indentations, no scent of ink, no warmth. Just pixels. That moment hit her harder than she expected. She realized the letters weren't clutter, they were conversation. They were the voice of people who no longer walked through her doorway but still lived in her words. Harold's handwriting wasn't just his style. It was his rhythm, his laughter, his pauses between "I love" and "you." When Eleanora shared this realization at her local senior center, other women nodded knowingly. Marjorie said she still reads the postcards her son mailed from Germany every Christmas Eve. Doris keeps her husband's old grocery lists because his chicken looks exactly like his love. They all agreed, paper remembers what the heart sometimes forgets. That's when Eleanora started a new ritual. Each year, she writes herself a letter, a note about what she's grateful for, what she's learned, and who she still misses. She seals it and tucks it away in a drawer marked "Open when I forget." It's her way of leaving breadcrumbs for the future, so her story never fades with time. If you've been sorting through your drawers, wondering what's worth keeping, pause before tossing those old notes. A letter is more than paper. It's proof that someone, somewhere, took the time to write your name slowly, with care. So tonight, before you sleep, take one handwritten card and hold it. Feel the texture, trace the letters, hear the person behind the words. Because love, once written, never really leaves the page. Mini prompt: do you still keep handwritten notes from loved ones? Tell us below. Your story might remind someone that love doesn't fade, it just needs to be reread. 2. Family recipe books. The recipe book had been in Eleanora's kitchen for as long as she could remember. Its pages were butter-stained and soft at the edges, the ink faded into a delicate sepia hue. Inside, the handwriting wasn't all hers. Her mother's looping cursive danced beside her grandmother's neat script, with little notes in the margins like "Add more nutmeg if Harold's home," or "Best made on rainy Sundays." Every smudge, every spill told a story, of flour-dusted laughter, of burnt pies that still got eaten, of recipes that evolved as love was passed from one generation to the next. When Eleanora started decluttering, she found herself holding that old spiral notebook with mixed feelings. The cover was cracked, a few pages were missing, and the tape barely held the spine together. It's just a book, she reasoned, and besides, you can find every recipe online now. She took photos of a few favorite dishes, her apple tart, her mother's cornbread, the Christmas jam, and then gently placed the book in the donation box, telling herself someone else might give it new life. Weeks passed. Her kitchen looked spotless, her counters gleamed. She felt accomplished, lighter. But one afternoon, her 12-year-old granddaughter, Lila, came over for a baking day. "Grandma," she said excitedly, "Mom told me you used to make great-grandma Ruth's biscuits. Can we make them today?" Eleanora froze. She remembered the recipe, sort of. She could almost see the handwriting: cold butter, not melted. Never rush the dough. But the exact details? They were gone. She tried searching online, nothing came close. The texture was wrong, the taste too modern, too sterile. It was then she realized that the book hadn't just contained recipes, it had held her family's rhythm, their laughter, their legacy. Those pages were more than measurements. They were moments. The time Harold spilled flour across the floor while trying to impress her. The year her mother wrote, "Try this instead, Harold hates cinnamon." Even the grease marks told a story, proof that the recipes had been lived, not just read. That night, as the smell of failed biscuits filled her kitchen, Eleanora sat down and wept, not for the book itself, but for the chain of memory she had unknowingly broken. "I thought I was clearing space," she whispered, "but I was clearing history." It's something many seniors are realizing now. In a world obsessed with digital storage and spotless counters, handwritten recipe books are becoming emotional time capsules. They connect generations, not just through food, but through touch, handwriting, and ritual. Across the US, older adults are reviving these heirlooms, rewriting lost recipes, and even hosting legacy cooking nights, where grandkids learn to cook directly from their elders, stains and all. Now, Eleanora has started her own version. Each Sunday, she writes one recipe from memory, with notes, stories, and the little quirks that make it hers. The secret, she says, isn't in the ingredients. It's in the fingerprints left behind. If you've ever thrown away an old recipe, thinking it was just paper, go look again. You might find your mother's laughter in the margin, or your father's thumbprint on a smudge of dough. Because when we lose those family recipes, we're not just losing flavors, we're losing the sound of home. Mini prompt: do you still keep your family's handwritten recipes? Tell us below, what's one dish that brings your memories back to the table? 3. Wedding and military memorabilia. There was a small velvet box that Eleanora had kept for decades, tucked safely in the back of her dresser drawer. Inside lay a pressed rose from her wedding bouquet, yellowed but still fragrant when she opened it, and a bronze medal from Harold's service in Vietnam, his initials faintly scratched on the back. Alongside them were his cufflinks, a folded program from their wedding day in 1972, and a photo of the two of them grinning under a paper arch in her parents' backyard. None of it had much monetary value. But together, those items formed a story, the story of their beginning, their courage, and their promise. When she began decluttering, Eleanora told herself she needed to move on. It had been nearly 10 years since Harold's passing, and she'd heard it said that holding on to relics kept grief alive. "These are just things," she whispered, wrapping the medal in tissue. "The memories live inside me." She gave the box away to a local thrift shop, believing she was taking a brave step toward emotional clarity. But grief doesn't vanish with organization. It lingers quietly, waiting for meaning to return. Months later, while attending a Veterans Appreciation luncheon in her town, a speaker mentioned something that pierced through her heart. Every medal holds a story of service, and every story deserves to stay in the family. That night, Eleanora dreamt of Harold, standing tall in his uniform, the same one he wore when he surprised her after his final tour. She woke with tears on her cheeks, realizing what she had done. She hadn't donated clutter. She had released her proof, the tangible pieces of their shared bravery and love. The bouquet flower wasn't just dried petals, it was the scent of a summer day when everything began. The medal wasn't just metal, it was a heartbeat from a time when he risked everything and came home to her. She searched for the velvet box for weeks, calling shops and leaving notes. But it was gone. So, she did something new, something both healing and sacred. With her granddaughter's help, she began creating what many veteran and grief support groups now call a remembrance box. Inside, she placed copies of Harold's photos, a printed scan of his medal, and even a new rose, pressed between sheets of her music. "It's not the same," she admitted, "but it gives the memories a home." Across the country, more seniors are embracing this idea, building small boxes of remembrance to keep love stories, military honors, and family legacies from fading into digital oblivion. Therapists now recognize how deeply tactile memory affects older adults. The act of holding a medal, smoothing an old photograph, or touching wedding lace reignites emotional connection far better than viewing pictures on a screen ever could. Eleanora keeps her remembrance box on a low shelf near her piano. Every so often, she opens it, not to mourn, but to feel grateful. To remember the laughter on that June afternoon, the pride when Harold pinned on his medal, the quiet joy of shared time. Objects age, she says softly, but the meaning inside them doesn't. So, if you're decluttering, pause before tossing that ring, ribbon, or medal. Those items aren't clutter, they're anchors to the moments that shaped you. Give them a safe place to live. Mini prompt: if you could recover one keepsake from your past, what would it be? Share it below. You might help someone realize what's worth keeping before it's gone. 4. Vinyl records and tapes. When Eleanora Brant boxed up her vinyl records, she told herself it was time to move on, time to declutter the past. She'd watched dozens of minimalist videos saying, "If it doesn't serve your life today, let it go." And at first, that sounded freeing. The records were heavy, stacked in an old wooden crate near the window, gathering dust. Her granddaughter had joked, "Grandma, you know Spotify has all these songs, right?" With a smile and a small ache in her chest, she donated the entire collection, more than 200 albums spanning 5 decades of her life. At first, she didn't notice the silence. But after a few days, the quiet in her home started to feel unfamiliar. Her nights used to carry the gentle hum of her record player, that warm, imperfect sound that seemed to hug the air. Now, her evenings were sterile. The click of her phone, the cold clarity of digital playlists, it all felt empty. When she asked her smart speaker to play Moon River, The same song she and her late husband Harold had danced to in their tiny kitchen the night before their wedding. She expected to feel comfort. Instead, it sounded hollow, distant, mechanical. A few weeks later, her daughter visited and asked, "Mom, where's the record player?" When Eleanora said she'd sold it, her daughter went quiet. "You used to play Nat King Cole every Sunday. It made this house feel alive." That night, Eleanora lay awake, realizing she hadn't just decluttered her space, she'd decluttered her soundtrack. Months later, she saw a flyer at her community center, Vinyl and Memory Night. Bring a record, share a story. On a whim, she went. The room was softly lit, filled with laughter and nostalgia. One man brought an old Elvis album, another held a copy of At Last by Etta James. When the first needle dropped, the sound wasn't perfect. It crackled, hissed, breathed. But it felt alive. The air shifted. People closed their eyes, smiling through tears. A music therapist explained that analog sound waves reach the brain in a more organic way, stirring emotion and memory. Digital is precise, she said, but vinyl feels. It reconnects us to who we were. Eleanora sat quietly, her eyes wet, realizing that she had traded something irreplaceable for convenience. The next morning, she searched online for a replacement turntable, not sleek or modern, but something with history, like her old one. She found a gently used player and a copy of Blue Skies by Ella Fitzgerald, her husband's favorite. When the package arrived, she held the record like an old friend, running her fingers along the grooves. That first spin filled her house with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. The soft pop before each song felt like breath returning to a still room. Now, every Sunday, she chooses one record and lets it play as she makes tea. Her granddaughter sometimes joins, swaying softly beside her, learning to love what digital can't replace: the pause, the texture, the waiting. The crackle between songs feels like time whispering back. Above her turntable, Eleanora keeps a small framed quote she wrote herself. "Don't mistake dust for decay, some things age beautifully." Because now she understands, vinyl wasn't clutter. It was continuity. It wasn't about collecting, it was about remembering. And as the record spins, she feels herself returning, note by note, to the life she almost erased in the name of simplicity. 5. Handcrafted gifts from kids. When Eleanora began decluttering, she told herself it was time to let go of sentimental clutter. At first, it felt easy. She sorted through shelves, drawers, and boxes, tossing anything that didn't seem practical. But then came the box marked keepsakes. Inside were finger paintings, macaroni frames, and Christmas ornaments made by her daughter decades ago, crooked, glittery, and full of love. She smiled as she pulled out a lopsided clay mug that read "World's Best Mom" in blue paint. The handle had broken years ago, and the glaze had faded to a soft ivory. She hesitated, then whispered, "It's just stuff," and set it in the donation pile. At the time, it felt mature, forward-thinking. Minimalism promised freedom from emotional baggage. But months later, while helping her daughter pack for a move, she noticed her daughter had no keepsakes from her own childhood either. Not a single craft or card. When Eleanora asked, her daughter shrugged. "I think you tossed most of them when I left for college." The words landed softly but cut deep. It wasn't anger, it was loss, quiet and generational. That night, Eleanora sat by her window, remembering those little hands pressing clay, the laughter as glue dripped onto the table, the way her daughter's eyes used to sparkle when she proudly handed her a handmade gift. None of it was perfect, but that was the point. Those uneven brushstrokes, the glitter that never quite stuck, they were proof of love in its most innocent, unfiltered form. Minimalism hadn't freed her, it had erased part of her story. She realized something powerful: what adults call clutter, children call connection. Those imperfect crafts weren't just objects, they were moments captured in color and glue, small testaments to love given without polish or expectation. Studies even show that physical reminders of children's creativity strengthen intergenerational bonds and emotional well-being in older adults, especially those facing loneliness after retirement. So Eleanora made a new ritual. Every time she found an old creation, a scribbled card, a holiday ornament, a photo of her daughter holding a handmade gift, she took a picture of it. Then she recorded a short voice note, describing what it meant to her. "This mug was made the year you turned 7. You mixed the blue paint yourself and told me it was my favorite color because it was the color of calm." She uploaded these clips into a digital family archive, a living time capsule her granddaughter could one day explore. Now, instead of shelves filled with boxes, she has a library of memories, preserved not as clutter, but as connection. And once in a while, she still makes space for the real thing: a tiny ornament, a handmade card, a single keepsake to hold. Not for its beauty, but for its heartbeat. On her desk sits that same clay mug she once gave away. Her daughter found it in a thrift shop months later and brought it home, chipped but still whole. Eleanora keeps it beside her morning tea, a quiet reminder that some things, no matter how small, messy, or cracked, deserve to stay. Because for her, those little hands didn't just make crafts. They made love visible. 6. Old journals and diaries. When Eleanora came across her old journals, she laughed at first. They were thick, worn notebooks bound with ribbon, filled with messy handwriting and smudged ink. She hadn't opened them in decades. One was from high school, pages of heartbreaks and daydreams. Another was from her early marriage, where she wrote about learning to cook, losing her first pregnancy, and the joy of hearing her daughter's heartbeat for the first time. She felt a sting of embarrassment. "No one needs to read this," she murmured, convincing herself it was just emotional clutter. One by one, she fed them through the shredder, watching her handwriting, her younger voice, disappear into strips. At the time, it felt cleansing. There was something empowering about letting go of old pain, of pages filled with self-doubt, guilt, and grief. But as the months passed, something shifted. She began forgetting small details, not major things, but the delicate ones. The name of her daughter's childhood friend. The street where she and Harold rented their first apartment. The exact words he said the night he proposed under that flickering diner light. The pieces of her story began to fade, and there was nowhere left to find them. One evening, while sorting digital photos, she realized her pictures showed faces, but not feelings. Her journals had captured her heart, not just her life. Every crossed-out word and doodle had been a trace of who she really was: imperfect, emotional, alive. She whispered to herself, "Those weren't just journals. They were proof that I lived fully." Today, many seniors face the same quiet regret. In a world obsessed with decluttering, physical diaries often seem unnecessary. But memory fades faster than we expect. Studies show that journaling helps preserve not just memory, but identity, reinforcing emotional resilience and mental clarity in older adults. Writing isn't about keeping the past, it's about remembering how we became who we are. Eleanora eventually discovered digital storytelling tools like Storyworth and Legacybox. With them, she began reconstructing what she could remember: short reflections about moments that mattered, the scent of her mother's kitchen, the sound of her husband's whistle, the trembling joy of holding her daughter for the first time. Her granddaughter helped her record her voice reading these stories aloud, preserving not just the words, but the warmth in her tone. Now, once a week, Eleanora sits with a cup of tea and writes again, not in fancy leather books, but in simple digital notes that her family can one day listen to. She writes honestly, even about the embarrassing parts, the teenage crush, the failures, the fears. Because she's realized that the voice we silence today becomes the memory we lose tomorrow. On her desk sits a small quote card that reads, "Our words outlive us when we dare to keep them." Sometimes she still wishes she hadn't shredded those journals, but now she writes not out of regret, but out of legacy. Her story isn't lost anymore. It's simply being rewritten, one memory at a time. And as she smiles at the screen, typing her final reflection for the night, she says softly, "The last thing I let go of wasn't just sentimental, it was a part of who we were." 7. Tools and objects that represented skill. When Eleanora stood in the cool stillness of her garage, her late husband's woodworking tools lined the wall like quiet soldiers. Each one, from the dented hammer to the sandpaper-worn chisels, carried a story. For decades, she had watched him shape rough timber into furniture that outlived both storms and trends. But in her new mission to simplify, those same tools began to feel heavy, outdated, unnecessary. With a sigh, she boxed them up and donated them to a local trade school. The next morning, the empty wall felt colder than she expected. Months later, while visiting her daughter, she walked into the backyard and froze. Her grandson, sleeves rolled up and brow furrowed, was building a birdhouse. His small hands trembled as he adjusted the wood, mimicking patience she recognized instantly. "I wish I had Grandpa's tools," he murmured, not looking up. That sentence hit her harder than any regret so far. It dawned on her that she hadn't just given away objects, she had given away a tangible bridge between generations. Those tools weren't clutter. They were heritage, etched with the muscle memory of love and labor. Her husband's hands had held them. His lessons were in their weight, their scratches, their smell of pine and oil. Across countless homes, seniors faced the same quiet mistake, parting with objects that once shaped their sense of purpose. The old Singer sewing machine that stitched a family's clothes. The paintbrushes that captured sunsets on canvas. The gardening gloves that coaxed color from soil. In the rush to downsize, they vanish, taking entire stories with them. Psychologists call these items symbols of continuity, physical reminders of skill, identity, and connection. Letting them go too quickly can make the world feel smaller, emptier. But keeping one piece, even one tool, can preserve a legacy. It's not about clutter, it's about carrying forward meaning. Eleanora decided to reclaim that legacy. Though her husband's original tools were gone, she found one of his old measuring tapes listed for sale online, the same model he had used since their first home renovation. When it arrived, aged and scuffed, she held it like a relic. The tape still clicked the same way. It still measured in fractions her husband had once explained with patient laughter. Now, every Sunday, she and her grandson measure things together. The height of the rosebush, the length of his growing arms, the span of the old dining table. Each measurement is a thread connecting past to present, proof that craftsmanship doesn't die, it transforms. For seniors, keeping a symbolic tool, a ladle, a brush, a camera, is more than sentiment. It's memory made tangible, identity made visible. Decluttering should never mean deleting the evidence of who you were. It should mean choosing what still tells your story best. Eleanora's home is simpler now, but her mantle holds that single tape measure, a small, quiet testament to skill, love, and the unseen legacy of hands that built more than wood, they built belonging. Eleanora now keeps a single shelf, a quiet corner she lovingly calls her memory shelf. It's not large or fancy, just a simple wooden plank near her window where the morning light pours in. On it rest 7 small things that survived her decluttering journey: one handwritten letter, a biscuit recipe stained with butter, her husband's service medal, a record sleeve worn from years of playing, a clay ornament her daughter made in 2nd grade, a diary with yellowed pages, and a chisel once held by hands that built their first home together. She no longer calls them clutter. She calls them anchors. They remind her that a minimalist life doesn't mean erasing your past, it means honoring what shaped you. These pieces, though ordinary to others, carry her laughter, her love, and her legacy. Every time she dusts that shelf, she feels grounded, not in what she lost, but in what she chose to keep. Her message to fellow seniors is simple yet deeply resonant. Declutter your space, but never your story. Eleanora realized that minimalism is not about absence, it's about presence. It's not about removing things that take up space, but about cherishing the ones that fill your heart. And in that small act of keeping, she discovered peace, not the silence of emptiness, but the calm of remembrance. So, if you've been sorting through your things lately, ask yourself this: what item tells your story best? Keep it. Display it. Let it remind you that your years were not wasted, they were beautifully lived. Before you go, here's how you can hype this video and support this channel. On your YouTube app, scroll down and swipe left on the comments until you see the hype button. Tap it, choose how many points you want to give, and confirm. It's that simple. You get 3 free hypes every week, and every single one helps this message reach more seniors who need to hear it. If this video touched your heart, go ahead, tap hype, hit like, and make sure you're subscribed. Together, we're building a community that treasures memory, honors experience, and proves that aging wisely isn't about letting go, it's about holding on to what truly matters. Your memories are the heartbeat of your home. Protect them, cherish them, and if this spoke to you, hype this video, hit like, and share it with someone who might be decluttering their past today.